To our next story now. Net migration to the UK this year could reach 1 million. That's right, 1 million. It makes a mockery of the claim that leaving the EU will give us back control of our borders. More than 45,000 migrants arrived on small boats in 2022, and over 6,800 have already crossed the Channel this year already. But that's a tiny fraction of the total number of people who are settling in the UK each and every year. Well, joining me now is immigration lawyer Ivan Sampson and a good friend of mine, the director for the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, Stephen Wolfe. Wolfie, I'd like to start with you. This is an eye-watering figure, the prospect of moving forward towards 1 million net migration. How the heck did we get into this position, Stephen?
Well, it's clearly huge numbers. The total numbers that are coming into the country this year is 1.4 million. And from that, you can see that with Hong Kong, Ukraine, and those coming over the Channel, that's about 300,000. You had 260,000 workers, but with that, 155,000 dependents. But the biggest number of all came with students at nearly 500,000 and 136,000 dependents on that. So that's how it was broken down. How have we got there? We've got there because the government has made a clear decision to increase the numbers of those coming on skilled visas, but reducing the amount that's required for those to come in. So you're getting a lot more low-skilled workers. But the biggest decision of all, and actually you talked about Priti Patel, it came during her term as Home Secretary to actually announce the massive rise in students and allowing the dependents to come with them.
And Ivan, I'd like to turn to you now. We've seen Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, getting involved this week, saying that the plans to stop migration are immoral. What's your take on that?
Well, the figure's a little bit misleading because take students that Stephen mentioned, 500,000 students, 61%, and that's the government's own statistics, leave at the end of their course. That's the first point. Of those that remain here, staying under the graduate visa scheme, 95% will eventually go home. So only 5% of students actually settle in the UK. That's the first point. The other point is that students spend around £20 billion a year in our economy. And that pays for doctors and the NHS and things like that. And then also we want to attract top students. We want to have another Richard Branson or another Elon Musk. We don't want to deter the brightest students from around the world from coming to live in this country. It would be foolish to do that. And there's plenty of places for them to go. America, for example, delighted to take these students. So, you know, I think we need to think about what's in our interest, economic interest. And Stephen doesn't talk about that. All he talks about is numbers. Numbers,
let's
too much, it's too much.
Well, Stephen, let's put that back to you, because something that is in a huge number of the British population's financial interests is the cost of putting up illegals in hotels. Stephen, this isn't enriching the UK from your point of view, is it? This is costing the taxpayer a huge amount of money, and surely, if the government don't do anything about it, they'll meet with fire and brimstone at the electoral ballot next time.
Well, the institute that I do just generally looks at costs and numbers and allows other people to make the decisions on policies and whether they think it's right or not. Finally, we had the Home Secretary and the Home Office accept numbers close to ours when we said that it would cost the country around £3 billion, if not more, for the cost of asylum and immigration. Now, the question for most people is whether they think two things, whether that's an acceptable number to be paying for the people coming over. And I don't believe that when you look at the polling that's been done by most of the big polling companies over the past 10 years, that the British public want to be spending huge sums on what they regard as the asylum system or illegal migration. And equally on the other side, when we're talking about large-scale population of potentially 1 million net migration, there are significant costs that we know, for example, in water and infrastructure. We're 4 billion litres of water short every year based on a population of 66 million, off what is accepted that if the population does go up to 67 or 68, we're going to need another 2 billion litres of water a year. And that costs huge amounts. We're seeing houses rising and cost prices not coming up, infrastructure costs on the roads. Every time you see population increases, the costs outstrip any of the benefits that we receive in income. And when Ivan talks about the 20 billion in students, that number actually also includes very clearly the number of home students being placed in the UK. That is not a number related to those foreign students of the 400,000. Otherwise, they'd be significantly putting around 100,000 each a year. And that just doesn't happen.
OK, Ivan, I can see you shaking your head there, but I want to put it to you. 1 million net migration, that is a Leeds and a Nottingham combined each year. Those numbers are surely unsustainable, Ivan.
Yes, but we need workers. Let's be quite clear. One of my clients needs 30 mechanics, lorry mechanics. He's paying £80,000 a year to each mechanic. He cannot fill those posts. So he's having to go to South Africa to fill those positions. So we need long-term plans to recruit resident workers. Until we get those long-term plans, and that's going to take time, we're going to still have to recruit from overseas. The NHS would collapse if it wasn't for foreign workers. We wouldn't have an NHS. I don't think, even if you take the head of Migration Watch, he's an ethnic minority. He wouldn't be here if it wasn't for migration. So, you know, I think we need to understand that there's economic needs of this country, and we got to get used to the fact that the face of the UK is going to change. There's going to be more brown people here. That is a fact of life.
Well,
and over the next
hang on,
50 years, that's going to happen.
Ivan, hang on. Alp is a pal of mine. Alp is a proud immigrant to this nation. That doesn't mean he can't have opinions on controlling numbers. That's his right. By the way, he's not here to defend himself. Stephen, I want to come back to you. Ivan paints a picture there that the NHS wouldn't exist and nobody would be able to repair their cars if we weren't having uncontrolled immigration. Surely that's not the case.
Well, it's not the case across the country. When you look at the actual numbers of the NHS, London skews the biggest figures of all. And Ivan would be right that without the immigration numbers in London, certainly the NHS would fail, but not in other parts of the country. But the key point about that is that over the past decade, under this Conservative government, they have reduced the opportunities for the numbers of people who wanted to be nurses by making them all go to university and cutting the numbers of grants that were there. So there is plenty of demand. We know that. There was over 200,000 people who wanted to apply to be nurses in the UK alone. There are issues that relate to engineering and other types of jobs. That's been an issue that's been there for a while. And the Migration Advisory Committee, when it was established, was supposed to work with the government to set up schemes to enhance swiftly some of those key areas. We've not seen that come through. So there is always going to be a need for immigration. Those of us who believe in managed migration, like myself, someone who is also a family that is ethnic minorities and also people that have come over to the country, absolutely believe in managed migration. But we don't seem to have a system at the moment that is actually effectively managing the migration, either on asylum, illegal immigration, or indeed looking at the interests of working population.
OK, Ivan, over to you for the final say. Uncontrolled immigration, is that the answer then? Just throw the borders open, allow anybody in the world to come to Britain to work? Is that what you'd like?
No, not at all. I want resident workers filling British jobs. I want British nationals filling British jobs. Well, that's what I'd like. But until we get to that point, we're going to need foreign workers. And just one point about illegal immigration. People coming across the boats are not illegal. Stephen should get his language right. The Refugee Convention describes them as irregular, not illegal.
Let's let Stephen come back on that. It's often mooted that they are not illegal. Stephen, final word on this.
Absolutely not. The UN Convention of Refugees doesn't regard people that have come over to the country as legal. They only become legal once they claim asylum. So the moment they get into the boats, they are illegal. They become legal once they claim asylum. That is the clear fact, Ivan. You should understand that under international law. It's very clear. OK, we're going to have to leave it there. Ivan Sampson. Oh, hang on a second. No, let's not leave it there. Ivan, get back to you. You're accused there of not understanding international law. You're an immigration lawyer. You have a right to reply. Indeed. Please respond to what Stephen just said.
Indeed. So we're talking about a second from them being illegal for them being non-illegal. I mean, it's just playing with words. We know people are claiming asylum. We know those coming across the boat are not coming for a day trip, are they? They're coming here to claim asylum. We know exactly what the purpose is. So please stop describing them as illegal. Simply not true.
OK, well, you had the final say there, Ivan. That's all a fair debate. We have both sides of the table here on GB News. We pride ourselves on that. Ivan Sampson, Stephen Wolf, thank you for taking part in a fantastic debate.